This past week has marked a pivotal stretch in the ongoing pursuit of accountability and fairness surrounding Jeffrey Epstein's case. A member of Trump's cabinet confessed to visiting the convicted sex offender's private island following earlier denials. Ghislaine Maxwell proposed a deal, offering to exonerate both Donald Trump and Bill Clinton in exchange for a pardon. GOP members finally gained access to the uncensored documents, yet discovered additional blackouts. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice monitored those same legislators during their inquiries, a move that prompted even House Speaker Mike Johnson to criticize the current leadership. On the topic of the DOJ, let me address this directly. I'll respond to the inquiry on my terms. No, I'll handle it as I see fit. Your points come across as misleading, and I suspect you've just provided false testimony. Substantial proof exists in the Epstein records. Never suggest I'm involved in wrongdoing. I think I mentioned that to you, Attorney General, prior to your remarks. You don't dictate to me. Actually, I did inform you, given what we observed in your Senate actions. Not even qualified in law. The exchange was intense, with palpable strain in the air. And the most surprising part? The leader of our nation is generating major stories by detaining reporters and removing correspondents from the White House briefing group. He's slashing FEMA budgets at a time when citizens are enduring blackouts. Plus, he's dissolving his own emergency oversight committee just as they prepared to decide on key proposals. Then he boldly appears on screen to brag about these steps. He actually positioned himself in the Oval Office and announced during a broadcast, "We'll be the ones deciding on media matters that independent journalism meant to protect us from overreach." Astonishingly, roughly half the population views it as routine coverage and moves on without pause, as if it's everyday business. It's tough to process everything. This isn't standard, regardless of how often I've highlighted it over the past year. We must cease acting like it's acceptable simply because it occurs again and again. Picture this scenario. In February of the previous year, the Trump team made a decisive step by declaring they would assume full authority over the media rotation. If you're unclear on that concept, the media rotation involves a select, alternating set of journalists who join the president in settings where room is limited for all. Consider spots like the Oval Office, aboard Air Force One, or secure gatherings that permit only a few attendees. For more than a century, the White House Correspondents Association oversaw who participated in that cycle. In essence, reporters chose fellow reporters to report on the president rather than the president selecting favorites for the occasion. But Trump examined this established practice, one enduring longer than many lifetimes, and concluded it didn't suit him. His decision. No thanks, I'll manage it myself. And the justification he offered was truly remarkable. The Associated Press, among the largest and most vital news entities worldwide, essentially the foundation for community reporting throughout the U.S., declined to label the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America solely because Trump issued a directive to alter its name. That served as his basis for assuming command. Typically, a display like Pam Bondi's would fit right in with certain political circles, but I believe it reveals much about the Epstein matter that it fell flat this time. They continue seeking clarity, and her evasions, outbursts, and dramatic flair regarding a network of child exploitation, that's central to the issue. Pam Bondi serves as the U.S. Attorney General. She stands for the public, not Donald Trump or Bill Clinton. She advocates for the individuals affected, particularly the survivors in the Epstein affair. So the most compelling visual amid the disorder underscores this reality. If you looked away even briefly during those proceedings, you probably overlooked critical details. There's plenty to examine, and it's astounding that it all played out publicly. Here's the breakdown. The episode began when a media organization refused to adopt the absurd designation the president invented for a waterway. The administration's reaction was immediate and bold. They entirely prohibited the Associated Press from White House functions. It resembled ejection by security personnel. Naturally, the AP wouldn't accept that quietly and filed a lawsuit against the government. This was an evident violation of free expression rights, plain as day. Rather than retreating, the government intensified its hold, revoking the full correspondence group's power to organize the media rotation. In an instant, it ended, and matters escalated further. Reuters got pulled as well. Thus, from the trio of primary wire services that supply content to neighborhood papers and regional broadcasts nationwide, two found themselves excluded. This resulted in areas like a community gazette in countryside Ohio or a nightly report in Mississippi lacking direct insights into presidential statements. In place of trustworthy providers, pro-administration channels and supportive online writers filled the gaps, posing easy inquiries and offering praise along the lines of, "Appreciate it, Mr. President. Your work is outstanding. We're grateful for your efforts." At the same time, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stood at the lectern, framing the ordeal as an effort to broaden opportunities and include additional voices. But frankly, anyone with basic insight recognized it as a bid for dominance. This leadership was evidently aiming to select who posed difficult queries, guaranteeing the response was none. No one would raise anything probing or uneasy. Then, toward late January, Don Lemon, a well-known news figure and ex-CNN host, faced detention by government officials in the early hours in Los Angeles as he reported on a demonstration. He was simply present with equipment outside a sanctuary in St. Paul, Minnesota, where activists assembled to challenge the minister's role as an immigration enforcer. This gathering stemmed from the heartbreaking death of a 37-year-old parent of 3 at the hands of an immigration agent in Minnesota, sparking widespread anger. Don was fulfilling his role by recording the occurrence, a standard journalistic practice. You can even hear him in his broadcast feed affirming, "I'm only here capturing images. I'm separate from the participants. I'm in the media." He repeated it several times, ensuring clarity for viewers. Let's pause to dissect the recent developments, and believe me, it's extensive. There was an instance where a correspondent ended up detained and accused of serious national offenses. And remarkably, the official presidential profile shared a humorous graphic to mark the event. They uploaded content about turning lemons into something else, including lock symbols beside the journalist's image. It's difficult to fathom transforming a grave matter into a joke. Now let's examine it piece by piece, as the overall view is even more disturbing. This goes beyond a single shocking update or erratic reporting period. It's a recurring theme. And the theme is evident. Trump seeks to direct the narrative. Every update you encounter, the accounts you view, he aims to determine who conveys government activities. He's approaching it from multiple directions. To fully understand, we should begin with the media entry situation. This forms the base for what comes next. For more than 140 years, the White House Correspondents Association has directed press engagements with the president. The concept is straightforward. Neutral reporters, not merely those endorsed by officials, deserve presence during significant choices and when the president addresses or confers with global figures. The function of the rotation reporter is essential. They don't report solely for their platform. They distribute observations to all, allowing every outlet equal access to unfiltered details. This enables a community bulletin in Iowa or a broadcast in Tennessee to stay informed on presidential actions daily. It's the core of U.S. reporting, often unnoticed until removed. And that's precisely what Trump accomplished. By barring major entities like the Associated Press and Reuters from the rotation, he's not only aiming at those groups. It's a strategy that disconnects countless local stations dependent on wire feeds for national updates. Consequently, rural regions miss primary details on presidential doings. Who gains? Trump does. Since now, numerous citizens receive only the sanctioned, tailored rendition of events from his group. It's challenging to accept the recent events. The administration opted to release details to a sympathetic source, one unlikely to question them. The leader of the Correspondents Association, political reporter Eugene Daniels, voiced concerns, noting, "This action erodes press autonomy in our nation." Global press liberty organizations echoed the criticism. The radio, TV, and online news group declared plainly that no leader should select their covering journalists. Then the administration replied. Leavitt asserted it wasn't driven by beliefs. Instead, they argued it aimed to increase the range of participating platforms. But no one was deceived. It was apparent they were replacing impartial voices with aligned ones and labeling it viewpoint variety. And if that wasn't worrisome enough, consider the events involving Don Lemon in Minnesota. This extends past a single prominent media personality. It conveys a troubling signal to every reporter nationwide, particularly those contemplating stories the leadership prefers hidden. On January 18th, tensions rose as demonstrators entered City's church in St. Paul. They learned a pastor served as an immigration official and were demanding accountability for Renee Good's death, shouting calls like "remove ICE and fairness for Renee Good." Yes, it interrupted activities. Protests often do. But injuries were absent, and no damage occurred. It was noisy, disorganized, and tense, precisely the type safeguarded by free speech protections. Lemon was there chronicling it all. He engaged with the pastor and activists. He practiced genuine reporting. Yet the Trump-led Justice Department accused him and fellow reporter Georgia Fort of plotting against faith practices and disrupting services, all while equipped with recording devices. Adding to the absurdity, a federal magistrate reviewed the original claim against Lemon and found no signs of illegality. A senior judge in Minnesota dismissed it. However, the DOJ persisted, only for an appellate panel to reject it again. Two separate judicial bodies affirmed insufficient grounds. So what followed? The DOJ sidestepped them, presented to a grand jury, and secured charges. It's remarkable how events are unfolding. Much appears concerning, especially on media liberties. Groups like the Committee to Protect Journalists, typically vocal about detentions in nations such as Egypt or Myanmar, are alerting U.S. citizens. Amnesty International demands lemons prompt freedom, deeming it a severe risk to basic freedoms. The Freedom of the Press Foundation adds that these detentions via dubious legal angles serve as cautions to peers. The intent is obvious. If you're in media, proceed carefully since authorities seek pretexts to pursue you. It's deeply troubling. The leadership appears to warn reporters, report favorably or face consequences. While this media liberty turmoil continues, actual public services are deteriorating in ways that affect daily existence. Throughout the year, Trump has openly advocated dismantling FEMA. He mentioned it amid updates on Hurricane Helen. A primary evaluation board headed by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and Transportation Secretary Pete Hegseth formed to consider restructuring or complete removal of the organization. They devoted months to a detailed 75-page preliminary document packed with substantial alterations, including staff adjustments. They plan to deliberate on these suggestions December 11th. But in a twist resembling a farce, the administration aborted the session at the 11th hour. Not the prior day or morning, but under 60 minutes before start time. Certain board participants arrived to learn their entry passes failed. They discovered the cancellation upon denied access, akin to an abrupt no-show. The repercussions are substantial. FEMA faces internal reductions on New Year's Eve. Incidentally, Happy New Year. Some emergency response personnel got notifications of termination, stating their roles were no longer required. These are the essential workers in crisis handling, and it's impactful. It's notable how FEMA operations have evolved recently, particularly amid calamities. Currently, around 40% of staff hold short-term agreements previously extended routinely. Now, those end without renewal. Simultaneously, a massive backlog of relief funds, precisely $17 billion, remains idle as Kristi Noem insists on personal sign-offs for disbursements. Formerly, aid approvals took roughly 3 weeks. Now they exceed a month. Areas hit by tempests await allocations approved by lawmakers long ago. This week saw a shift when a FEMA representative testified in Congress, claiming the criteria for federal assistance are overly lenient. He proposed tightening standards, suggesting excessive aid distribution. He voiced this shortly after a severe cold front left over 300,000 without electricity in Tennessee, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Quite the moment. Now, let's review the figures, as they illustrate the scenario clearly. Pew Research issued a poll indicating Trump's favorability at 37%, a decline from 40% last autumn. Merely 27% of citizens backed the majority of his initiatives, down from 35% at his second inauguration. His overall rating averages hover at -13 to -15, lower than Obama or Bush at comparable stages in their re-elections. The Cook Political Report lists him at 41% with a -5.3 net. Prospects dim among key midterm demographics. Backing from 18 to 29-year-olds has fallen from 52% to 25% in recent surveys, a 27-point plunge in a year. Independents show a 23-point net drop, and Latino support dips by 16 points. Within Republicans, enthusiasm wanes. Quinnipiac reflects his party edge, narrowing from +90 to +76. Pew notes GOP approval at 73%, with trust in his integrity falling from 55% to 42% over the year. Cracks appear even in his core supporters. With midterms 9 months out, pressures mount. It's striking how dynamics have altered. Immigration, once a strength for the president, now reaches new depths. The Minnesota incident, combined with disruptions and detentions, has muddled his key platform into a liability. What does this signify for regular people, for you, your loved ones, or that apolitical acquaintance who just seeks reassurance? Here's the essence. Your link to governmental actions is eroding step by step. When the president chooses accompanying reporters, it ceases to be objective coverage. You receive government-vetted communications masquerading as journalism. When media professionals face arrest for documenting rallies, it causes others to second-guess attendance. And that's intentional, not accidental. It's strategic. The Freedom of the Press Foundation captured it well. The reply to this injustice shouldn't involve apprehension or restraint. It calls for deeper dedication to reporting and facts, particularly under free expression safeguards. But honestly, seeing a colleague detained for camera use, hit with national accusations, then the administration rejoicing via graphic, alters the landscape for all in the field. And it extends beyond famous names. Consider Georgia Fort, a freelance correspondent in Minnesota, recipient of area reporting honors, committed to community stories for years. Federal officers arrived at her residence, detaining her for recording a religious site demonstration. During her broadcast, she voiced that her constitutional protections seemed vanishing. That's an American local reporter in 2026 declaring her professional rights feel unsecured by law. If that doesn't prompt reflection or heightened awareness, what could? When community reporters retreat from fear of custody, we forfeit final oversight. Major outlets can resist with resources and counsel, but individuals like Georgia Fort lack similar support. The circumstances raise alarms for independent coverage. Those grassroots voices lack elite contacts or defense funds. They rely on equipment and resolve to share realities. And this leadership delivered a stark signal on their fate. Shifting to FEMA and crisis management, it's literally vital. The entity designed to aid citizens in crises is diminishing as storm periods approach. Positions vanish rapidly, and billions in support stall due to self-imposed red tape. Regions battered by winds, inundations, and whirlwinds last year still await essential aid. Compounding issues, the leadership seeks stricter eligibility, reducing qualified areas. They're trimming the teams that deliver power units, hydration, coverings, and health aid post-disaster. Local governments face increased burdens. Yet specialists in crisis handling warn that most regions can't cope with large-scale events sans national backing. This isn't partisan rhetoric. It's the reality of response in an expansive land facing harsh climates. Now consider future possibilities. It's fascinating yet disconcerting. November's congressional contests loom 9 months hence. Trump appears aware of unfavorable trends, priming narratives of fraud should defeats arise. He told NBC he'd acknowledge outcomes only if voting proves fair, and we grasp the implication. It mirrors 2020 tactics. He floated GOP oversight of ballots. Though his spokesperson minimized it to identification rules, Trump promptly clarified on air that Republicans should oversee voting in no fewer than 15 locations. It's as if his aide struggles with clarification since Trump vocalizes unspoken elements. Here in February 2026, the picture is vivid. The president selects his media escorts, sparking concerns. Reporters encounter national crime allegations for routine duties. It's surreal. FEMA shrinks amid blizzard, stranding thousands in darkness. And $17 billion in relief lingers unresolved, aggravating those in need. Don't overlook electoral matters. The leadership conducted a search at a Georgia voting center 9 months pre-midterms, stirring controversy. In another development, the president publicly hints at rejecting results, injecting unease amid his record-low popularity. Youth demographics have abandoned him. Swing voters follow suit, and party loyalty frays. It's somewhat ironic. This Republican faction spent the Biden years decrying speech suppression, cultural exclusions, and progressive efforts to mute opposing views. Yet now silence reigns. No outcry as reporters face custody, and the spokesperson chuckles at inquiries. All prior uproar over tech restrictions and academic policies evaporates when their leader directs. It seems they disregard free expression fundamentals. It's transformed from ideal to power play. It wasn't genuinely about open dialogue, was it? It focused on their faction's unchecked expression while stifling dissent. Now in charge, those proclaimed defenders vanish. It highlights swift value changes. Currently, we observe a distressing pattern where checks on authority, like media, judiciary, and legislature, are sidelined, coerced, or commandeered sequentially. It appears each mechanism for oversight endures assault. I recall numerous instances where we anticipated normalization, believing it peaked just last year and before. Similar hopes arose, but it never stabilizes. It invariably intensifies. The core concern isn't potential decline. It's if sufficient people recognize and respond before the final honest recorder encounters that ominous visit late at night.